So when we factor, we want to look for the greatest common factor, the greatest number that goes into both of these terms. So 12x and 15, I can see that the 3 goes into both of those. And so really factoring is backwards distributing. So if you remember distributing, we just do that backwards. We have the result, and now we need to take steps backwards. So look for what they have in common. So 3 times 4x plus 3 times 5. Now that factor they have in common is going to go out in front of that parentheses. What I do is cross it out so I remember that I've put the 3 because that's what's in common out in front, and then what's left, the 4x and the positive 5. So that's factoring out the greatest common factor. Now one thing you want to do is you do want to check and make sure that there aren't any common factors with 4x and 5, and they don't have anything in common. So let's go down to 8y minus 24. Again, what do they have in common? The first thing I see that they have in common is a 4. So 4 times 2y. And since the 4 is positive here, I want to keep the 4 positive over here and keep that negative with the 24. So 4 times negative 6 will give me negative 24. And again, I take out the positive 4's and put them in front. And then I'm left with 2y plus negative 6. So I don't really want to do plus and negative 6. I want to go ahead and do minus 6. And then I notice, again, I need to check my terms inside the parentheses. 2y and 6, they do have a common factor. And that common factor is 2. So I didn't factor out the greatest common factor. So I kind of need to start over again, this time realizing that 8 goes into 8 and into 24. So it's 8 times y plus 8 times negative 3. Now, is it okay to go ahead and put your minus here instead of inside? Yeah, it is, but I'll show you why on this next one, negative 6h minus 10, why I don't want to do that. And so my factored form here, I take out the 8's, that goes in front, and I'm left with y. Again, plus a negative, no, I just want to go ahead and put minus 3. So on the negative 6h minus 10, it's whenever the leading coefficient is negative, I have to factor out the negative. So really all they have in common is a negative 2. So negative 2 times 3h gives me 6, and a minus 2 times positive 10. So I have the common factor of negative 2, that goes out in front, and I'm left with 3h plus 10. Remember, notice that the 10 is positive, and 3h and 10 have no common factors. So therefore, this is our greatest common factor being factored out. Alright, this last one, negative a plus 7. Again, I told you when the leading coefficient, and again, coefficient refers to, let's go and highlight them, the number multiplying the variable. In this case, oh, I thought that was going to highlight. So here's my highlighter. Negative 6 is the coefficient in this one because it's what's multiplying the h. In this one, it's 12. In this one, it's 8. So the leading coefficient here, even though we don't see the number, is negative 1. You can write the 1 in if it helps you, but we don't have to write in the 1. But that's what I factor out. Negative 1 times a. And if I factor out a negative 1 of the first term, I need to factor out a negative 1 of the second term. And so it's not negative 1 times 7, because that would give me a negative 7 if I multiplied it back out. It's negative 1 times negative 7. And you can see that negative 1 times negative 7 would give you a plus 7 back. So I factor out a negative 1, and I'm left with a, again I took out the negative ones, minus 7. Well, good thing we know what the coefficient is, because now we want to factor out the coefficient. So can you name the coefficients in all three of these examples? 5, again negative 6, and 1/3. Those are the coefficients. So if I'm going to factor out 5, well, the first term, that's easy. It's 5 times x. But then this is the hard one. I'm going to go ahead and leave it plus 5. You can write minus 5 if you want, but I want to put my minus on the inside. But 5 times what equals negative 7? Well, what I really did to this term to factor out the 5 is I divided it by 5. And that's the key. So I divide 7 by 5. And I go ahead and leave it as that fraction, 7/5. And if you multiplied that back out over here, 5 over 1 times negative 7/5 equals negative 35 over 5, and that equals negative 7, which is what we had just a minute ago. So 7/5, or negative 7/5 in this case, is what we need. And really, we're done right there. Does it have to make sense? Does it have to be pretty? No. But we do want to factor out the 5's. Put that in front. And we're left with x plus negative or just minus 7/5. Now, do you want to write that as 1 2/5? Or even minus 1.4? That would be fine. I like to leave it like this because then I can see where I factored out that 5. So let's try the next one. Negative 6y plus 3. Again, I need to factor out the negative 6. Of the first term, that's easy. I need to put that in parentheses. Negative 6 times y. Again, I need to factor out a negative 6. So I divide 3 by 6. Well, and also, it's a negative times a negative that will make it positive, or a plus 3. Again, I take out my negative 6's and put that in front, and I'm left with y minus, and I can go ahead and simplify 3/6 to 1/2. And that's factoring out the coefficient. Now, our last one, 1/3 a plus 6, that one's a little scary because now I have to factor out a fraction, and I know how scared everybody is of fractions. But just like police, they're your friend. You just got to get to know them. Spend some time with them. They start to be really awesome people, or in this case, numbers. So I factor out the 1/3. 1/3 times a, that part's easy. Plus 1/3 times what? Well, again, I divided 1/3 a by 1/3 to leave me with a. So I divide 6 by 1/3 in order to find out what that would be. Well, this equals 6 divided by 1/3, and whenever we divide by a fraction, we can multiply it by the reciprocal. The first term stays the same, change divide to times, and the reciprocal of 1/3 is 3. So when I divide 6 by 1/3, it actually gives me 18. Pretty freaky, huh? Well, whenever you divide by a number between 0 and 1, it will actually increase the number. So we take out 1/3, put that in front, and I'm left with a plus 18. And that is factoring out the coefficient.